while we're waiting for Jason, why don't you explain how we got here?
Okay, so Twitter. I think I'll do my best to infer what you mean here, but Twitter the other morning was like, "Hey, you've been here for 15 years, wasting your life," and it suggested I tweet about it. So I did. So I tweeted why I signed up for Twitter, which was that Brian and then I joined you. Were in the Twitter offices debugging a problem, and and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jack Dorsey at one point walked across. We were sort of sitting almost in their lobby. I mean, it was a startup. It was a small building at that point. Walked through the lobby and kind of called over his shoulder, "Hey, did you fix the problem with Solaris yet?" Because they were experiencing some nasty performance problems that they were seeing in production. They were in production on the Joyent Cloud, which was based on Open Solaris, and they weren't seeing the same performance problems on like their Linux desktops under no load. And therefore his inference was that it was a Solaris problem. And I don't even think we had an opportunity to respond to that, like, no, it's not a Solaris problem. He sort of stalked off. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, that is my memory as well. I remember he did come in and ask, "Have you found the problem with Solaris yet?" And at this point, we had found the problem, and it was in Rails. And I'm like, "Who's this asshat?" And the guy that Blaine was and it was not Twitter, right? It was Obvious at the time. And Blaine was the Obvious engineer. So it was we were with Blaine and Jeremy, among others. And Blaine said, "Actually, we found it. It's in Rails." And he was just kind of like walked off. And I'm like, "Go fuck yourself. Why am I sitting here debugging your app, pal?" Like, who's that?
I did not. I assumed that this I did not remember that it was Obvious. I remembered.
What is Obvious?
What is it's the Obvious test? No, Obvious is this is the name of the company. Was Obvious.
But was this because they started as like a podcasting company?
Why were they called Obvious? I don't know if Jason can get his tail in here. Okay, yeah. All right. So Jason says he's showing up for the list. He's finally updated the app. I feel like I tried to prepare him for this, but I prepared him poorly. That's a good. Jason's going to know this history better certainly better than I do. But they had pivoted from whatever they were into, and they were Twitter had fewer vowels. I don't think they had. Did they have an E? I think they did have an E when we were there. By the time we were there.
Yeah, but at the time we were there, I think it was like mostly on SMS.
Was that right?
That was pretty early.
It was definitely early. So this is in April of 2007. This is why we're here, because it's calling out the 50. So we got out of that, and I'll explain to the bug that we debugged. But I came away from that being like, those guys are such clowns. I really liked Jeremy a lot, but I felt like Dorsey was such a clown, and I'm just like, that thing's got no future. And I was like, there's Jason. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna create an account there. And you came back with the opposite impression of like, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna add an account.
No, actually, except for the first part, I just came away with I'm going to create an account because there was a time in my life when I desperately wanted to be AHL on as many platforms as possible.
This is an AHL maximalist thing.
Yeah, and including I have other stories about how I social engineered my way into AHL on GitHub and on Hacker News and things like that. This is my problem. This has nothing to do with Obvious or Twitter.
Right. And now, were you cognizant of the American Hockey League when you did this?
No. So I welcome Jason, by the way.
There we go.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, glad you made it up here.
What a trash can!
It is.
That's what all of our guys.
It is so true.
So you can't use a fucking microphone on the desktop app, or it's only through a mobile phone, or
that's exactly right.
That's what $45 billion buys you. All right, come on.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's bad. It's bad.
I see.
I'm so sorry to be.
It's okay.
To drag you into the badness. So Adam.
Okay, so you want to know where I heard you guys talking. You want to know where Twitter actually came the fuck from and how?
Yeah. Well, so actually, Jason, I mean, if you could just take us back to that.
Yes.
Give us that 2006, 2007 South Park zeitgeist, because there are a lot of companies happening around that time.
Yeah. Well, and it goes a little bit further back than that. In that they started occupying that office in the beginning of 2005. So we were, because I was even using a desk in there for like 2 years before Twitter existed.
And was this like over on Bryant? Am I remembering
that
correctly?
No, it was over like in South Park.
In South Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And no. So it started. The original company was Odeo, and that started in the summer of 2005, and that was Ev Williams, who of course made Blogger, and it was Noah Glass. And the company that did Blogger was technically called Pyra Labs, and that's what Ev was one of the founders of course, and Google bought, Blogger. But there's some fucking thing where they bought Blogger, but they didn't actually buy Pyra. He was able to still use it. Noah had done this company called Odeo Blog, and so they sort of took Odeo Blog and Pyra Labs, and they raised some money from the guys at CRV, and then a whole bunch of angel investors. So, like for example, James Hong, of Hot or Not fame, was probably the biggest. Yeah, because I actually, when Ev gave James his money back for Odeo not happening, meaning the podcasting thing, I actually was then across the street at a bar with James, drinking with him, looking at this check. It was sort of funny. But so it was Noah and Ev did that. So they did Odeo, and it was Odeo sitting there, and Odeo had we started doing, like, we had like a Ruby on Rails, little sort of meetups around the city, and we started doing them then at the Odeo office too, because they had
what were they making? Were they making you said they were podcasting?
It was literally so it was also Flash based, if you were going to go all the way back, but it was like a directory and search for people's podcasts. So it's just a way to share podcasts. There's literally just an early podcast directory website, like almost a RSS aggregator, but for fucking podcasts.
For super early podcasts.
Yeah. That's right.
What are podcasts in 2005?
I think everyone was saying that it wasn't like successful, and so but,
right. But, yes, that's important.
But Noah, of course, was there doing, like, I'm pretty sure Noah did the fail whale design, eventually. But then Florian was there doing Rails programming, because the part of the Odeo backend started being more and more in Rails with like a Flash. I mean, imagine a Flash front end with the Rails backend, and you can see what a fucking
what can go wrong?
Trash can on fire that was.
It feels snappy.
So did that, and Florian was one of the, because at the time there was 7 core Rails committers. There was, of course, David Hannemeyer Hansen, and Toby, who's now the CEO, of course, of the CEO and founder of Shopify. And then we had like Scott and Mike and like 2 others. So we had 4 total committers at the joint. And then Florian was another Rails committer, and he started working at Odeo. And so that's...
And this is Scott Barron, right? Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. Because Scott was the one that did all the
DTrace probes. You remember that, right?
And also was the one that worked with Apple to get all the DTrace probes into the Ruby version they were shipping too on Macs. And so basically it was the type of thing where then, because Florian was now to Odeo was one of 4 companies in existence, basically, whatever the fuck Shopify was called before it was called Shopify, it was called something else, it was a snowboarding website, at the time. And then Odeo, and then Joyent, and then of course 37 Signals were like the 4 companies that had Rails committers, sort of in it. So we started doing little Rails meetups and shit in the Odeo office. And they decided to sort of do one of these, weekend hackathons. At that period of time, a whole bunch of us, strangely myself, it was either myself or Tomtech was like the number one dodgeball user in San Francisco at the time. It was all, dodgeball stuff. You're, what I mean, where you're dodgeball. Yeah. Where you're all checking over, you're checking in over SMS and that type of thing.
You're right. Yeah.
But dodgeball had also been bought by Google at that time and was sort of, increasingly less used or that kind of thing. But basically on that, one of those like little hack day, sort of hack weekends, Blaine and Jack and Florian mocked up this whole fucking thing that was like dodgeball. You would like check in and that, but it had this sort of, you would chat back and forth sort of element too. And that was TWTRR.com. So Twitter with no vowels.
Vowels. Okay. And this is all via SMS.
Yeah. So the main thing there was, the main interface was, like the website would let you read stuff, but it was basically non-interactive. The main user,
right?
The input and output, if you will, was SMS. And it was funny because even in the first, because we took, actual Twitter into production in mid-January 2007. And a big part of that infrastructure was all of the SMS daemons and the like. There was as much, there was more SMS sending and receiving and email sending and receiving in that than there was for the website. Actually, it was no one gave a fuck about the website. But it was Odeo, and then it was sort of like Twitter, and then they all decided to go like all in on Twitter. And of course, being called TWTR.com with a weird fucking bubbly, version of that wasn't going to fly. So Ev went out and spent the money and bought Twitter.com. It was owned by somebody the fuck else. And I think they spent, I don't know, $500, $600 on it. And then they decided to not do Odeo. So Ev bought out, CRV's, Charles River Ventures, and gave, James his money back. And so he made all the investors in Odeo whole, which was cool. It's what actually had people sit down and say, okay, well, we'll come on board of this Twitter thing or that type of bit. And so, yeah, it became, Twitter sort of at that point. And then later on.
And so this is like, is this 2006 at this point? Where are we?
Yeah. Yeah. We're like,
okay.
We're the thinking's 2006, but we're like because when Twitter.com went live in January 2007, like that sort of actual with the new name and the current look and that kind of thing.
That was in January. Okay.
Yeah, I still have the fucking I still have the quote and the architecture, and it was. We went live. It was loaded January 15th, 2007, because it was a clean billing cycle, basically. In that sense.
And then because I think we were in there in April. So certainly the thing obviously has got overwhelming popularity, basically from the jump.
Well, So the funny thing about it is I guess it did, but the thing that took, like, the first time there was a major outage because like a big user showed up was when John Edwards got on Twitter when he was running for president.
Really?
Yeah, John Edwards was the the first big Twitter user. Yeah.
Okay, and so that is strange. Of course, that is actually, that kind of fits with, he's running in 2008, so it is early 2007. Yeah. He's getting ahead of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was so it's funny because there wasn't really any quote unquote outages in Twitter sort of January, February, sort of time frame for sort of 60 days because I mean it was um the way it did the Twitter infrastructure there is it actually was fronted by because of because it was pretty clear in interacting with sort of the development team there that they didn't really they weren't exactly
Not rigorous.
yeah 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 and it was actually like it had so many um but I have solutions to that. And the solution back then, meaning 15 years ago, the solution there is that if you don't trust what somebody's doing, is you put them behind gigantic big IP load balancers that you can go change the logic of almost everything inside of iRules and by
Right.
writing Tickle. So
Right.
Twitter was behind
A big F5 or whatever.
literally two clustered big IP 6400s that were like on 2 gigabit per second times 4 uplinks to fucking level 3's internet. And but you had essentially big IP sitting in front of it, and then Mongrel was brand new. If you remember Mongrel, one of the ways of running like a freestanding little Rails process.
Right.
So I basically I was load balancing off the big IP 6400s directly to just as many mongrels that I could jam across, that sort of memory space as possible. So it's a bunch of mongrels sitting there. And then separately on that, Nginx and didn't exist yet. Light HTTP did, Lightspeed did. So we had like sort of static, .twitter.com for all the static assets. And then that was basically off of Lightspeed, which was a proprietary, sort of web server, initially back then, but it could fucking, it was the Nginx of its time.
Okay. Jason, you should clarify because you were not at Twitter.
I was not at Twitter. No, I was at Joint, but
In Joint, where all of Twitter's infrastructure was hosted.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Now we happen to be things where I would work at a desk in that building, just like how Niall Kennedy didn't work at Twitter, but he worked at a desk in that building. So I was working out of that office, 3-4 days a week in that period of time. Because Joint was I lived in San Francisco, but Joint was in Sausalito. Who wants to go, across the bridge? Who wants to go across the fucking bridge or take the ferry every fucking day just to sit at a computer somewhere else, And so, no, in that period of time, I was pretty much there. And that was, Jeremy Latrosse was doing ops, there.
I love Jeremy.
Yeah, but he's a good classic, ops guy, where for every major outage gets a tattoo to remind himself of it. It was super professional from that standpoint. But it was big IP load balancers in front of mongrels. Then I'd set up a load balancing thing and it sort of a clustered MySQL in it. And then some of the stuff that was cheating, all of the messaging stuff was all eJabberD and done in Erlang. But because at that period of time, we had done a lot of Erlang-based chat infrastructure for people like, Major League Baseball and different stuff. So we had a good handle on how to operate that stuff. And then there were these SMS daemons and mail daemons and some different things that, fucking Blaine basically wrote in fucking Ruby. That was that stuff was a bit of sort of an issue. But there was the funny thing about it was, and the first outage is a good example. The first big outage of like, why the fuck's the site down, came when a bunch, like 5,000, all of a sudden John Edwards signed up. John Edwards had 5,000 followers, right? And that would sort of the current Twitter, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but Ev and Jack and these guys, everyone had basically less than 100 followers at Twitter back then. And the way the website worked was these geniuses didn't, and it's funny because every issue that was ever there is entirely not surprising and entirely predictable. You know what I mean? It was like, there was never a problem there where you sat down and was like, oh my God, there's like, Jesus Christ, someone's getting a fucking Turing award for that one. There was never that. It was always like, well, yeah, like why the fuck would you turn the caching headers off? Why would you do that? Well, we want to make sure it's updating all the time. Yeah, but that's not how that works, man. So followers were not paginated. So if you loaded up John Edwards' page, it loaded up 5,000 profile pictures from 5,000 followers on the single page.
Yeah, sounds like a problem.
So, and then the pages were also had some JavaScript on them that every 60 seconds would reload the page on its own to give you sort of the latest update. That was the JavaScript that was up there.
So like all these abandoned web browser tabs would just be like DOS in the site?
If one person had an open tab in their browser just back there somewhere, and they had John Edwards' page there, every 60 seconds that browser would make 5,000 plus requests to the application. Yeah.
I believe this predates tabs for whatever it's worth. I think this has to be a browser window in this 2007 era, right?
It's around the same time that it came out, I guess. But it's
wow.
Yeah. So so that was when the great feature showed up, where all your users don't show up as a list on the right side of the page. It became paginated, so it's only like sort of your top, that's sort of there, in the user experience. We had a lecture about why, it's not really a big deal if somebody updates their profile picture and it's stale for an hour or so, but let's not turn off, headers or sort of do this or sort of do that. But it was one of the ones where, they basically, the call always starts with, you pick it up, and it was always Jeremy, or, once Jack was running it, if they're really upset, then it was Jack calling, when he fucking called me on Thanksgiving, 2007, that was another fun one. So, but it's, it's like, why is your network down? Why are your servers down? It's like, well, the network's not, like, nothing's down. So, and then you sort of go in and, you start taking a look at, what they're doing. I mean, what was nice about, having this sort of discrete load balancers, even they were, at that time, $150,000 for a pair, but allowed you to sort of go into a customer and look at what was going on, independent of what they said they thought was going on. And then you could go and, write a couple iRules and force caching there, or fix a sort of issue, or, kill the page off after a certain size or something like that. So I just went in there and quickly did a thing where we just chunked all the requests, so it's like 20. Yeah, it's basically, after the first 20K came out of that page, that was sort of it.
Cutting you off at the bar.
Yeah, but the way they had it, though, is the text came out first anyway. And it just means that, the 300 pages of John Edwards' follower profile pictures didn't load. But, that was sort of okay. But no, John Edwards was the first person that broke Twitter. Yeah, that was the first big one.
That's the thing he'll probably be known for.
It'll be the fourth sentence in his obituary.
Yeah, that's right.
So I recall us, and I kind of went back to our earliest correspondence. And so it must be the case that by the time they hit March, April 2007, like, they're in pretty consistent pain. Because certainly by the time we got in there, they were in very consistent pain. And I just remember walking in there. And Jason, you can tell me if your memory is different. But I remember Jeremy telling us that the requests were taking several hundred milliseconds each.
Yep.
And I'm like, good news. We just need to find the IO.
Yep.
Like that's great.
Yep.
And he's like, no, there is no IO. I'm like, no, there has to be IO because
Yep.
you can't spend 100 milliseconds executing instructions. Like that's too many instructions.
It's not how computers work.
Right. As it turns out, no. And so just to, and I don't know if it's worth at this point or if it's worth just talking about the specific issue that we found.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So they had, I mean, just as you were describing, that they were very frustrated that they could not deal with more requests simultaneously. These CPU's cores are absolutely pegged doing CPU work, and busted out dtrace pretty quickly. And like, where are we spending our CPU time? It's all in bcopy.
Yep.
Why are we in bcopy? And looking at the stack backtrace, I just remember us being, and I'm not sure, actually looking at the bug report that Alan Kubersmith dug up. I actually don't think that my memory was wrong on this. I just remember 434 stack frames deep. We are very deep doing these constant bcopies, and it didn't take us too long to figure out that what was actually happening is that we were in the Ruby code that was gathering a backtrace, a symbolic backtrace, because we were throwing an exception. And the reason we were throwing an exception is because we had decided, we collectively, humanity, had decided that the way to, we don't want to just iterate a for loop with a terminating condition. We should actually walk off the end of an array and get an out of bounds exception. This is a much more elegant way of solving a problem, which makes exceptions load pairing. And that was all we needed to do is change that for loop. And it was what do you remember?
Well, Brian, just to clarify a little bit more on that, because when we'd run off the end of that array, then we'd throw an exception. And part of throwing that exception, because the runtime didn't know necessarily where it was going to be caught, was to gather up and make symbolic the entire stack trace.
Yes.
And so that was a shit ton of work. That was immediately thrown away. Because we were like 300 frames deep or something, right?
Yes. And it's going to be thrown away by the next frame, by the caller.
Right, by almost the next instruction, right? And then doing that ad infinitum.
Exceptions should be exceptional.
Yep.
I mean, I actually came to just not believe in exceptions at all, in part because of this. I think exceptions are. I actually much prefer Rust mechanism for using algebraic types to do this. But if you have exceptions in your language, they should be exceptional. They should not be for routine conditions, because you're taking yourself into a collision course with parts of the runtime that are not optimized. So I remember finding this, and I remember thinking, like, this is great. This is a big win, and they are going to be very grateful. That was, I would say, gratitude was not the emotion. That was
no, because you're talking about a group of people that, when the milk in their latte is warm, they would spit it back at the barista. I mean, it's not that's sort of like, that is.
It was a problem.
You know what? I sort of, I'm just sitting around in my Los Gatos compound, sort of retired. I don't give a fuck. I mean, these guys were some of the least educated ghetto developers I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, I felt so bad for Jeremy on a day-to-day basis.
I did feel bad for Jeremy.
But, just imagine a bunch of fucking high school dropouts that are now learning Rails before they could go copy shit off of Stack Overload or something. I mean, it was fucking terrible. I do remember would run into these types of issues where it's like the fact that this group of people are now here together debugging this thing, okay? And we're not over there at Blaine's desk lighting him on fucking fire, okay? You know what I mean? It's just sad.
Well, and I remember, and I can't remember if he said it to me or to you and you related to me, but I recall vividly at some point Jack describing having 22 years of real-time systems experience. Am I remembering this correctly? And me being
he said something like that.
And I'm aren't you 27?
Yeah,
how is that possible?
I don't think he was even. I don't think he was even that old. But it was. Yeah, I mean, it was. it was a learning experience, I guess, from that standpoint. I mean, the funnier the you know the I'm going to give you another example of give you an example of one that uh, I didn't pull in geniuses like yourself to take a look at. There's things where literally, uh, Rails at that time would be like, /home /app name / images, right? And we were sitting there, and again, the site basically wasn't working, and the skip to the end, I was sitting there trying to get into. And it was always failing on basically pulling things out of the image directory. And so I was trying to get into the image directory, and I couldn't, and I couldn't, and I couldn't. I was like, what the fuck's going on in here? And, long story short, what I discovered was there were millions and millions and millions of profile pictures in this single directory. If not billions. I mean, it was basically it.
Nice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was sitting right in relatively spanking brand new, ZFS too, right? So that was even, it was that image directory that, for example, the whole we'll just reboot the server. It took I don't know, fucking 8 hours to finally load that directory up. But that was self-inflicted too, because I said, well, there's not even, there's less than 10,000 users on the fucking website. How the fuck can there be literally a billion profile images or a million, or, and it was ridiculous. I mean, it was one of the ones where, oh no, I remembered how I remember how we discovered the number. I couldn't get in there. And so we still had a bunch of net apps around. And, I said, well, what I'll do is it's letting me send copy it across. I'm just gonna try to just copy it over to the NetApp filers and see what happens. So it's chugging away doing that. And then, a big error pops up and says, you can't have more than 38,400 files inside of a directory type, error that NetApps used to spew out. Because if you used filers back then, you'd have to do your own hash directory structures and lay it out yourself and, organize things nicely in it. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, somebody's fucked up here. And then did a thing where, then ran something. And I remember it took hours to run, and it came back that it was, this gargantuan number of files inside of it. And it was millions or billions. It was fucking ridiculous. And they weren't that big. And there were these little profile pictures. So then I said, okay, well, I'm going to take a guess here, right? And so I do it again, and I just grep for the name test in these files. And at the same time, I'm starting to poke through all the unit test files and stuff that they're in the Rails app and sort of everything else, right? So the fucking guys working on it, part of the unit test they would run would be to write a profile image. And then they had this other thing where it would not clean up, and the test would fail. And there's this comment in there about, guy said failed test, so adding random string generator in front of test.
Oh God.
So
oh no.
So what they had a unit test they were running all the fucking time that was writing a profile image, but the engineer that did it wasn't able to remove it. His quick little thing he commented was he just put random string and then with the word test on it. And
That's kind of like removing it.
And what they did
It's
is
kind of a removal.
Yeah, and then I don't know how you can run a test that many times either. They managed to run this test so much that there was random string test.png millions of times in this directory, and that degraded the performance of the website for some period of time. That was probably so. There was just a lot of that stuff.
And I feel that what made them frustrating at the time was certainly I found this way with the issue that we found. You must have felt this way with the issue that you found. It's on the one hand, it's like, oh boy, gosh, how did we do that? Sorry, we're growing so fast. This is a mess. But it just felt like there was a kind of a level of indignation of like, well, why can't the directory have billions of entries? It's like the website should be fast with billions of entries. Like, oh,
yeah,
physics,
but
though.
the thing is, it's just that's just the it's just a case study of the Dunning-Kruger effect, my friend. And that is that people of limited knowledge and competence will always overestimate that knowledge and competence, and they'll always if you've been making, because you got to appreciate some of the mindset of some developers at that period of time. They're coming and making relatively small websites that a small number of people would use, right?
Right. I mean, we're coming out of the nuclear winter of the .com bust.
Yeah, and things like Rails and the like made that super easy. It made it super easy to have a website that 100 people would use. But when you started sort of heading into real system engineering land, and the like, it turns out that you do have to understand that computer science basically is not just you typing your little novel in a thing and turning it into a movie. Like it's not what it is. You actually have to understand the systems that you're on and what they do and why they're being architected. And you have to actually have to do fucking engineering is what you have to do.
And I feel like that period of time too was this really kind of interesting shift where Silicon Valley historically was making infrastructure, but not really consuming that infrastructure. That infrastructure was being consumed elsewhere, certainly like in New York. And one of the feelings that I had being with Twitter is you need to actually get some people from JPMC or Goldman Sachs. You need to get folks who like you think what you're doing, or Bloomberg, because like what you're doing with this looks a lot like a ticker plant. I mean, this looks like a trading system. And these problems actually have been solved by people that are super smart and are very experienced, but they're not here. They're not in San Francisco, at least not right now.
Yeah, but even the challenge with those folks is that a high frequency trading system and these things can be high performance, but they're maybe on less than 120 physical systems.
Totally.
I mean, like what a lot of the web guys were dealing with, and I think people don't. When you sort of think even 2007 to today, people almost get. I mean, because Twitter back then ran on, basically a rack of servers, right? It's on one hand, the paradigm that started happening was everything basically became a variation of a chat app. I mean, there's sort of this messaging at the core, and there's high-speed messaging needs, and it is elements of what you see in exactly the financial services space historically. But then those tend to not even be as large as some of the systems that had to start being done in the web space. And you had this you had this explosion in the back office.
Yeah.
You guys, did you ever notice you ever hear the story of their first Hadoop cluster there?
No.
What year are we talking about for that?
Fuck. It was well, so yeah, there was probably
2008, maybe.
Yeah, I forget exactly, but the short version of it was they wanted to do super fast Hadoop. You guys will love this based on your background. But they wanted to do quote unquote super fast Hadoop. So, and they were going to do that on brand new spanking SSDs. So they got a whole bunch of servers. They stuck these in Switch data center like by us when we were in there. So I was having a chat with while at our own joint stuff at Switch, talking to the Twitter people, that had their thing in Switch there. And they were sort of relaying to me the issue they were dealing with at that point in time. And it was basically the Hadoop cluster would really get going, and then the whole fucking thing would just pause. And
Firmware time. It's firmware o'clock.
Oh no, it gets better.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it gets better. And there'd basically be no disk I/O for some period of time, like just zero. And it was always like right when these fucking things, you understand, like when they were doing stuff in this, it was one of those ones where it's like, watching a lowrider bouncing around. Like you're like, oh yeah, these servers are doing fucking work right now. Like, okay, like you can just feel this thing vibrating. So long story short, we're digging in there, and the guys are trying to figure out this and trying to figure out that, and I remember like looking at the stuff, and they had all this shit on the floor, and I'm picking it up, and I'm staring at it. I'm like, okay, well, you guys stuck all SSDs in here, right? Yeah. And I go, you went like cheap SSDs? They did, and they had bought laptop SSDs that all had like drop and vibration protection. So the systems would actually get enough vibrating from the workload they were doing, and it would actually turn all the protective mechanisms on all the SSDs to protect them from damage. So then that was an easy fix. You just have to replace all of those. And yeah, I think they got all that. They were getting all that shit from Dell, but they went off on their own and bought a bunch of laptop SSDs and filled their Hadoop stuff up, and the vibration sort of things kicked in. So there's always little things like that there. And I just, the thing too is people were just before that, everyone's just used to buying a big fucking box, and you ran your shit on a big box. And
I gotta tell you, I would love to, right now, I would love to be on that system looking at those laptop SSDs, because that feels to me like I'm going with my original hypothesis. I think that is bad firmware, or firmware that is trying to desperately rewrite Flash. You filled up your Flash, and the FTL layer is not keeping up.
I think that is a perfectly valid assumption. I think it's a perfectly valid assumption.
Definitely buying consumer grade SSDs and putting them in a data center, you're going to get a whole new series of pathologies.
Well, especially at that time, because it was pretty early for consumer SSDs.
Yeah.
Was there even trim yet?
I don't think so.
Not really. Yeah. Matt, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah. Okay. Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say I was surprised to hear the anecdote about all of the thousands or millions of images in one directory, because I don't know where I picked up this bit of like Unix best practice type folklore, but as far back as 2004, when I was 23, I knew that if you've got a whole bunch of files, you want to use like prefix directory names to split them up into subdirectories. And I don't know where I picked that up, but I know that
probably,
I did.
But there was a lot of what I would explain to people, and in the kind way that I was explaining it to the team back then, is I said, look, there was a bunch of us that had experience with email systems. When you go and design like the storage backends for large scale email systems, you do exactly as you just described. I mean, particularly
I might have picked that up from looking at like a Qmail server or something.
And literally like Qmail heading into postfix, and the whole conversation in the email server space back then was exactly how to horizontally scale out, tons of individual, emails, sort of like in there. But in that period of time, if you went like even, I think we ended up making like a Ruby gem, or one of those sort of Rail modules that basically made it easier to do like a hash directory structure under the images thing. But you started sort of keying it up. It was still pretty junky. And the funny part being is that the solution we ended up coming up with then was just to get them to stop storing those images. And it was right when, because, Amazon Web Services had DevPay, and then they did Simple Queue Service, and they just launched S3. And so, the way we quote unquote fixed, the sort of illogical way they kept on trying to come up with solutions to store these profile pictures is we just moved all of Twitter's profile pictures on the fucking S3.
Yeah, interesting. And
So.
I mean, also the irony of that the directory case is that the ZFS actually does way better than UFS had done traditionally.
No, I was having this conversation with Jeff Bonwick soon after, where I was like, oh, dude, by the way, because normally, if literally what would have happened if that was a NetApp filer on, I think it's like image, whatever the fucking, why is my brain blanking on the multiple? But it's like 32,400 or but it's like literally it would have hit exactly sort of file 3,000, 30,000, 240, and it would have done an error and it would have written another fucking file again. Like that's but ZFS was just sitting there going, "Give it to me."
I know ZFS was trying to be accommodating. Exactly.
Just write it, and it was just like, and so I was just sitting there. Yeah, I was just talking to Bonwick, after that discovery, and I was like, I can't believe how much shit got jammed in that, but the whole rest of the system was completely fucking fine. It was just literally stuff was taking a long time in that directory,
right?
And I was like, that wasn't like normal file system behavior from an ops guy. I mean, from like the experience you would have. Normally, that whole system would have just shit itself. If that was the case, but no, I mean, it was a funny thing that, basically it demonstrated that, ZFS was just fucking fantastic.
And it was interesting because I think like all of those companies, certainly Twitter, had a total brain transplant over the years. None of those original early folks at Twitter. I mean, I remember Jeremy looking at me being like, I was kind of rolling my eyes at something Jack had said. And Jeremy's like, basically the first opportunity I have to get out of here, I'm going to get out of here. And he did. Good for him.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I caught up with him years later. He's like, oh yeah, no, I sold it all. I did it early. Never regretted it for a second. Never looked back.
Yeah. I mean, it's, but I mean, ops guys are, and I always think of myself as being very, opsy in mentality, but ops guys like Jeremy, they're just, it's a little bit like, what's that one famous Alexander the Great speech where he's like, show me your scars and I'll show you mine. All mine are on the front. There's never, good ops guys are like that, or just ones where, you basically roll in and it's already, you start heading through this journey of human psychology all the way through to then sort of what the technical issues are. But, you're just,
but they clearly changed their DNA over the years and got a much more, I mean, I think, and as also those companies, as the traditional vendors began to fade as kind of epicenters of technological innovation, the Twitters began to emerge. The Twitters and the Googles and so on began to, and obviously Amazon began to emerge as places where people would go.
But look how like take an example like Snap, right? Where meaning Snapchat is even how Snap came. Snap's a good example of sort of the next Twitter, if you will, that was 100% on clouds from the very fucking beginning. I mean, it just blows my mind sometimes to sit down and even look at their, their annual reports, and I don't know, they talk about spending, $1.5 to $4 billion, with Google Cloud, around sort of like doing X. And so, yeah, it's true. I mean, basically between, an Amazon, Microsoft, Google, there's enough things there that you can sort of piece together. I mean, there's just all this shit that exists from a SaaS perspective, and there's 300 plus services, that exist inside of each of those. Plus, you can still do some stuff on your own if you want to do it. I mean, there's just so many fucking options out there right now that just didn't exist 15 years ago.
So, Jason, rolling back to the, there was a period in Twitter where it became the experience became dominated by the fail whale. I mean, I guess the fact that we still remember the fail whale and they bothered to make like an adorable icon for when everything was fucked up, I think speaks to the zeitgeist. So their reaction, as I recall, was to blame you, like to blame Joyent and say that they're the reason why Twitter is down. Am I misremembering that?
They would do that. Yeah. And I didn't give a shit. I mean, meaning like when they left, they were down for 2 days after they left. I mean, and that was because they were moving over to NTT. Like NTT bought all Vireo data centers, and they were actually moving over to like NTT hosting. And they moved all of Twitter over there, and then got it up and running and switched their domain names. I mean, the sort of name servers and that kind of thing. And we still had, of course, all the replicas running on us. But they went down hard, and then called us, and we ended up, in about 24 hours having them back up and running on us for like another month or two, because what they learned is like Joyent was always, we were 1 in 10 gig as soon as you could be 1 in 10 gig. I mean, we were, trying to get, stuff out of Force 10. And then, when Arista was brand new and everything else, we were always trying to, have a really good network. Right. And they went over to, NTT, which is, as you can imagine, was like the big corporate hosting sort of, equivalent, out there 15 years ago, head over to Vireo and get your sort of things. But every fucking server had a 100 meg port in it, plugged into 100 meg switches, with like 100 meg uplinks. And so literally these guys, all the customer base there sits on 1-2 megabits per second of like traffic, maybe. So they rolled right into this all 100 megabit per second network. And they just came off a 10 gig network. And I can tell you too, like that type of messaging design and everything else in that just does not work on 100 megs.
Yeah, and once you actually hit bandwidth on those, once you're at throughput on the link, you're going to hit queuing delay. You're going to go nonlinear. It's going to get very sad.
Yeah. And there wasn't. I mean, people forget too. Just even 15 years ago, it wasn't like there was. It was a real sort of like echo chamber, sort of anyway. But we just. I mean, I think the first, their first bill was about, $3,800 a month or something like that, and then they ended up being a $150,000, $200,000 a month customer, in pretty short order. Because we were just. I mean, the name of the game there was basically just brute forcing it with mongrels. So like it was just essentially sitting there and staring at a mongrel process, and it's like, how many mongrel processes can we run? And so it was just one system after the other, just basically running that. I mean, it was a really good example for me too, because we had brought on, we just started thinking a lot about how can we get a faster Ruby runtime, and that was something multiple people were doing at that time. So, there was sort of the Ruby implemented in Ruby, type sort of thing. There was this eRuby, blah blah blah.
Okay, Ruby.
And when we first brought on Ryan Dahl, it was to, it was because of the work that he was doing on the Ruby runtime optimization.
I know that. It wasn't because of Node.
No, Mark pointed out that like the Ruby guy on the team has this cool thing called Node, but no, it was Node turned out to just be a side thing that.
I did not know that. I thought we had brought him in, or I thought you had brought him in. It predates me at Joyent, but I thought that was because of Node. But it was because of get Ruby.
It was actually
faster.
Based on his. It was based on his Ruby runtime optimization work and everything he was doing with eRuby. That's what it was for. And then it became a bit of, because you sort of look at what Node.js became, in a lot of ways, the instructive aspect for Node for me was like, Node is what Twitter should have been written in. Is a very good example back then. If we were sitting there and Node.js was a thing in 2004, 2005, then there actually would have been a lot less pain in the web space, in sort of, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have V8, right? I mean, the V8 is very load-bearing in that regard. V8 is the actual in terms of having high performance VM, and I think Twitter moved to Java at some point along. I mean, post Joyent,
Java and Scala. Apparently, they
right, they're big Scala shop.
Instead of having
Scala,
one mono repo or many repos, they have 2 mono repos. They have the entire world built in Scala and a similar world built in Java.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, isn't Scala implemented in the JVM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one VM, but 2 collections of code and coders who apparently hate each other.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, and it wouldn't surprise me. A lot of the Java stuff was more. It's probably separated by which domain the guys are working into. I mean, a lot of the Java stuff is probably people that are doing the MapReduce backends and different sort of analysis like that, and that's all sort of flow, if you will. And Scala is probably much more for the website and shit.
And I should note this debugging session that we're alluding to, back in 2007. Brian was writing some heroic dtrace because there were no we had done this work for the JVM to collect stack backtraces at runtime, but nothing like that existed for Ruby. Yeah. And I don't think even in JavaScript, right, Brian? We did that.
No, definitely not in Java. That was
Python one exist yet?
The Python one also did not exist at that point. That was maybe it just did. Maybe that was work that John Levin did. Maybe kind of concurrent in there.
But I think that opened our eyes to some of the needs around dynamic languages and ways to use USDT, which had been developed for an entirely different purpose, and for these other dtrace helpers for dynamic languages.
Oh, totally. Yeah, what I felt like that this I don't know if this was before, during, or after our brief love affair with Parrot as the second coming of Christ. Do you remember this?
I think Parrot was earlier because at this point we were at Fishworks, and the Parrot love affair happened while we were still in the kernel group.
And this was a brief love affair. This was a weekend fling with Parrot. Parrot being a VM to rule them all is what we saw. It's like, and we thought, this is great. We're going to have like the VM to rule all VMs that you can do all languages in, and then we can just instrument this one VM, and we will be able to instrument everything that Parrot can implement. Of course, was maybe not so much.
I feel like Parrot and like Raku or whatever it is has come up an alarming number of times as like a basically a dead end technology that we love talking about.
Yeah, because Raku, Jesus Christ. Yeah, because that's the meta model on a runtime virtual machine.
And look, Jason, I only know Raku because this is the 4th time we've had to dredge that one up.
Okay, so I know we have brought up Raku a lot. Are you sure we brought up Parrot this much?
You think we're talking about Raku independent of Parrot? You think
I think
those
are you
synapses are linked?
Look, you saying that? Okay, fine. God, we brought up Parrot that much.
But the funny part is, Parrot's still on GitHub, and its last release was in 2016. But the good news is its successor actually had a release today or yesterday. Look at that, more VM, baby.
More VM.
MOAR-VM, yeah.
More VM is the success. We definitely have not talked about that.
Yeah, that's a first, right?
Yeah. We have not talked about the successor.
It says more VM was created to allow for greater efficiency than Parrot by having a closer internal representation to the model system.
Look at that.
Yeah.
I am not as convinced that we've talked about Parrot quite this frequently, but I'm frightened. I actually don't want to back up on that because I'm sure we have. I am sure that I do not have the biological ability to talk about Raku without also mentioning Parrot and our brief Parrot love affair.
Yeah, so Parrot's talk about like a point in time capsules. I don't know what the fuck to even call that, but it's like
it was definitely like you had to be awake for that particular.
That's like bumping into somebody that has a certain style of a mustache, and they're the only one that has it, but it was really popular for like 2 years there,
right?
In one city,
right. And in Parrot's case, I think that city might have been Portland.
Yeah.
I just remember like OzCon 2005. Parrot was, I want to say, look, we just need to like completely talk about Parrot, Adam, then we'll never talk about it again. I
That'll
want to say OzCon 2005, peak Parrot. That's what I'm
I'm totally with you, and I think I read that Parrot book on the way back from either that OzCon or like Euro OzCon that year or something.
All right. I'm so sorry that we talk about Parrot all the time. I definitely remember we were getting on our kind of hands and knees to be able to figure out what that Ruby stack trace looked like. And I feel like we learned this lesson a couple of times, definitely saw it vividly there, that the biggest performance problems in the stack were higher in the stack rather than lower in the stack. And in part because of that era of suboptimal VMs. I mean, I think with Node and then with Go and then with Rust, I would like to believe that is becoming less true, but
no, I think it's entirely, there's just this, because we forget too that in that period of time, I mean, April 2003, AMD came out with a 64-bit x86 chip, but nobody else had 64-bit x86 as like their fucking 64-bit strategy, right? I mean, even Intel was Itanium, and a bunch of people still had shit on Spark and sort of everything else, and so it wasn't even clear exactly which fucking instruction set architecture everyone was going to end up on, and so you're sitting around and basically then in x86 land, and then you have this explosion of fucking languages that people are writing and sort of like whatever, and it was all just a fucking unoptimized mess from I don't know what 2004 2012, but since then everything's like exceptionally well done. I mean, if you're basically writing stuff in Rust and Go and everything else, or it's tough to fuck up an app now. At least the way some of those are.
And I do feel it's because humanity spent a lot of our mental energy on these consumer-facing web applications, these SaaS applications, and we got better at it. I actually think that. How's this for a hot take? I actually think the YouTube era allowed us to better communicate best practices, and the kind of the whole rise of like the recorded presentations where people could, you could watch videos from Surge and learn. I feel like Surge was RIP was a conference that Theo and crew held. Did you ever make it to a Surge, Adam?
No, I don't think I did.
Oh man, they were so good.
They were always great.
Surge was great, and the Surge 2010 in particular was the first one. I just feel like there was a pent up demand for sharing expertise, because you had now what had been kind of the folks that were not really systems thinkers necessarily in 2005, 2006, 2007 you have people that were real systems thinkers tackling these problems.
Yeah.
And the systems themselves were a lot better. Like the fail whale went away, right? Like ultimately Twitter figured out their problems. I do want, just because we promised we would, Jason, and also because Adam and I can't biologically resist it. We do need to talk about what a post-Elon Twitter looks like. Before we do though, Adam, I just wanted to go back to the AHL.
Yeah.
Well, no, because Jason had a really interesting tweet. I don't know, a couple weeks ago, Jason, where you're like,
sure.
I'm actually glad that I'm Jason H, not Jason.
Yeah. Or Jay. I mean,
right. You could be Jay.
So
I was Jay and I was Jason, and then I've been Jason H. I mean, because even Jason Kalkanis, who's Jason, he's the third Jason that's had Jason. You know what I mean? So, because I was like there when the single letters were being handed out. They weren't handed out to just people. I mean, so like, I mean, in my because my wife MJ and I, she's MJ. Okay, MJ and I lived with at K and at C. They were married, and we were splitting a house in San Francisco. So literally in my fucking house, like just amongst housemates,
5 letters for 6 people.
We've actually had dinner parties where it's been 10 single letters and 2 double letters at the party.
Wow, how do you feel as a peasant triple letter, Adam? You can eat on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Seriously, just leave it out for me.
Yeah. So no. I mean, because I think
Hey is still around. C has been suspended by Twitter. I'm sorry, as I'm checking up on what has happened to the single letters.
Where are they now?
Where are they now? This is the single letters of the alphabet.
At J is like I want to say she's at the New York Times or something like that. But and then of course Jason right now is Jason Calcanis, but like I said, he's at least the third Jason that's had that. But I'm sure he acts like he's always had it, but he hasn't always had it.
So Adam was AHL, then the American Hockey League comes along, and how did you negotiate your truce to the American Hockey League?
Well, so I feel very lucky that my initials aren't like NFL or MLB or something like that, because I'm sure there wouldn't have been a long conversation there.
Not have been as cordial.
I would have just tried to log in one day and it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
But no, I didn't know anything about the AHL, and Twitter wasn't that popular. But then at some point it started getting popular. And then I'd get these tweets that are like, "Go Wolverines!" and go Checkers, and it's the Calder Cup, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on here?"
Yeah.
And so that's when I discovered the AHL, and I bought a bunch of AHL jerseys because I guess I had $40 to spend on eBay too many nights in a row. But the AHL is at the AHL, and I've actually had some funny interactions over the years where they've said things like, "Well, you keep us well informed about whatever it is you're tweeting about, Adam."
Yeah.
So they acknowledge me. I think I don't want to. I want to stay off of their toes so they don't get hungry for a better Twitter handle.
Well, is it making you nervous that we're talking about it this
a little bit?
No, but the lesson for me is because I was Jason at WordPress. I have my it's my name at Gmail. It was my name at Rocket Mail. So once you start, the last fucking thing you need is Jason at Yahoo Mail. It's the worst email address in the world.
Right.
And so,
exactly.
So one of the absolute worst ones in the world. And so then, no, we sort of sat down and it's you do. It's of course I sign up and just I'm Jason everywhere else. No one's gonna. There were so many even customers like Twitter that don't even exist anymore. That you go and sign up for their app for. You know what I mean? So
when looking for, I was trying to remind myself about context about Twitter. And it is funny, all of the companies that it's mentioned at the Tail Rank. I'd forgotten about Tail Rank.
Yeah.
It's I've got a sentence that I sent in 2007. Companies like Twitter, Tail Rank, and Ning.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was Jason at Ning, that kind of thing. But the the funny thing about Ning is,
I love Ning actually. That's
the
Canadian, right?
Yeah, but there was a pair of engineers we were interacting with there, Ernie and Hassan, and that Hassan is Hassan Minaj, the fucking comedian.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, he worked at Ning.
Adam, I've got a coda for you in your AHL story. Are you aware of the fact that Alexander's my 14-year-old has become a huge hockey fan? Have I told you this?
No.
I didn't. I was on a business trip to Minnesota where we were doing Bring Up. I'd been gone for first business trip in whatever it was, 2 years. I'm in the airport. I want to buy something for the kids. I got them some, Minnesota Wild socks. As it turns out, what I didn't realize is from a sports perspective, the Broncos were doing poorly, and the A's like to torture their fan base. So my 14-year-old was immunocompromised. And when I dropped those Wild socks on him, he's like, okay, I'm a hockey fan now. I actually, I'm so angry with the Broncos and the A's that whatever this sport is, I'm going to watch this. And he's like, I guess I am a Minnesota Mild. This is upside down. Wild. Oh, I'm a Minnesota Wild fan. So he's like, oh, there's a game on this afternoon. So he has become a hockey super fan. This is only since October.
Really?
He goes from never having seen a hockey game at all to being he now views Minnesota as his ancestral homeland. I have never had an airport tchotchke purchase over delivered like this. Right? You do be careful. You got to be very careful. I feel God, could this have happened to any one of these things? But so he is, but in particular, he is now following these hockey players through the minor leagues. and you probably know where this is going. But he's
is this like the some recent minor league incidents?
No, this is more like,
okay,
hey, why does Adam have the American Hockey League's Twitter account? And this is, and I'm like, I mean, you've known this kid since birth. I'm like, what do you mean? Why does Adam? Why does the American Hockey League have his Twitter account? That's the question.
Exactly.
And he's like, Adam should really give them the handle, and which I view as an act of just total prejudice.
Seriously, that is ridiculous.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous. No, you know what? You can talk to him as well. I have punished him, just so you know. Like
good.
Well,
I respect no less.
Hey, the sad part for me, I mean, the where this hits like real life is my wife is at MJ on Twitter, and I'm flying in from fucking somewhere. I land at SFO. I turn on my phone, and I look at Twitter, and there's a tweet from Ohm, a friend, who's tweeting, "I can't believe we've lost at MJ, rest in peace, dunk." And was like,
oh my God.
I was like, oh my God. Oh my fucking God. So
this is how I'm finding out?
This is how I'm finding out.
I've been on a plane. I'm calling my wife. Nobody's picking up. I'm calling Ohm. Nobody's picking up. And I call a common friend, Matt. Nobody's fucking picking up. Nobody's fucking picking up. Right. So now I'm like looking and what's he talking about? And I go like, at MJ and I go over my thing. Okay. He was talking about Michael Jackson died. Michael fucking Jackson died. Okay. And somebody who's got
this is the danger.
Followers, okay, literally goes, "Oh, my whole wife's thing is at MJ for Michael Jackson or at MJ for Michael Jordan the whole fucking time." But like when Michael Jackson,
it is actually funny. No. You go to MJ's Twitter profile and she's like, "This ad is not for sale." That is the
oh yeah, because I mean it comes all the time. But,
not a pop star, athlete, or narcotic.
But if anyone's believe me, it's like it could be for sale. So the
everything's for sale.
But it was just it's just a thing on there where a like highly sophisticated long time 2-letter user himself like Ohm, right? Like rips off a tweet
about like, hey, you're talking about the death of my wife.
I mean, no, exactly. But this isn't like a random dude on the internet. I mean, this is
like a friend.
Like, like at the wedding, comes to the house for fucking dinner. We just saw each other in London. My wife's fucking Twitter handle. You must know it. There's no way you don't know it. And it's like, God, fuck Michael Jackson. Fuck Michael Jackson. I was like shaking. I'm serious. I'm running out of the plane. I'm like, Twitter?
Oh, man.
I find out she's dead on Twitter. That's what happens? That's what happens? That's how this goes? Fuck.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. All right, so we got to get to Elon predictions. Adam, do you have any that you got lined up?
He's going to let Trump back.
Yeah.
So
that feels like a safe one.
Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, so okay. That I feel actually the surest prediction is that he moves the headquarters out of San Francisco. That I feel is I feel that is the absolute unquestionable lock. First act, headquarters moved maybe to literal Mars, but if not literal Mars, then like I am moving them to like Okeechobee, Florida. Like what is where can I move it to that is going to like just get under the fingernails of as many employees as possible?
That's a great prediction.
Yeah.
That just feels like a lot.
Also, remote work is canceled. You need to move.
Right. Remote work is canceled. You need to move. And then, actually, we can't get out of this lease, and it's kind of complicated. And so next year, we're going to, you actually can work from this building. And basically, nothing changes. It's my prediction.
That's quite a parlay. I like it.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's not like, Twitter is the ongoing juggernaut of industry crushing features. It's a good example of an app and I'll just call it a fucking website, I guess, but like a website that despite everybody's attempt to make it not successful, it just can't help itself.
Including many people at Twitter.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm talking about people at Twitter. Yeah. No, I mean literally everybody there. I mean, even Jack is like tried his fucking best to have it not succeed. Like everybody there. But it just, you can't, I mean,
it's literally one of these few examples of just, I guess what it plugs into from a human psychology standpoint is such that like it can't fail.
Well, so I think that there are a couple of scenarios. I do think that there's a Tumblr scenario here where you guys think it's a lock that Trump comes back on. I don't necessarily think that that's a lock. I do think
I was just trying to pick stuff that would have some predictability. Some like, hey, yeah,
that happens, but that didn't happen. Yeah.
I'll take $20 on that. Well, I'll take $20 if Trump isn't coming back. It's like, all right, we can do that.
God, you are reminding me. Okay, you walked us there into the last time I won $20 off you.
Yeah.
Has it been paid?
Yeah.
Oh, it was paid. It was paid
Yeah.
because we were meeting Stephen O'Grady at the House of Shields.
Yes.
Of course. His office in San Francisco.
Office in San Francisco. And of course, my opener, great to be here at the House of Shields, across from the Palace Hotel.
Yeah.
The Palace Hotel is, of course, the site of the death of President Warren Harding.
Yes.
Of course,
so
who doesn't know that? Right.
Who doesn't know that? Well, so immediately Jason starts to nerd shame me and says, "You are the only person that knows that." I'm like, listen, I get that Warren Harding died a while ago, but he was a fucking U.S. president.
Yeah.
Lots of people know that. And in fact, I
was like, you fucking nerd. No one knows that.
No, right. And I'm like, every single employee at the hotel knows that. And he's like, I don't think a single employee who knows that. I'm like, great, this is easy to resolve. $20. We're going to walk across the street.
Yeah,
First
easy.
employee we see, we're going to ask them. Fine.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe we both have a couple of drinks in us. We're definitely ginned up. I know I am going to absolutely win money. Yeah. We walk in. First employee we see is the concierge.
Yeah.
I say, sir, a U.S. president passed away, and I didn't even get to the rest of that sentence.
Yeah, it's true.
And,
I remember.
The look in his eyes. I could have asked him anything about the Harding administration. We could have talked about Teapot Dome.
Yep,
we could have talked about the convention. I could have talked
100%.
about. I mean, this guy is like, what obscure aspect of Warren Harding do you want to know?
Yep.
And so he's like, he has a look of total knowledge. I'm like, just give me the money now. And he's like, yes. How can I accommodate your request? What would you like to know? Like, well, my friend here doesn't believe that you employees know who this person is. Could you just give us the name of the president? And of course, I remember being like, Warren G. Harding, 26th president of the United States of America. I can't even remember what number he is. But I mean, he definitely was adding like as much superfluous detail as possible.
He did it like in a special voice and everything. Yeah.
Right. And then Jason, again, we've had a couple of drinks in us. Jason is like, fuck you, that's the concierge. Like the concierge's job is to answer questions. And then I'm like, okay, that was $20. I now want $1,000 that we can find someone for whom the question has to be translated who knows the answer.
Yep.
And at this point, I saw a look that I haven't seen very frequently in Jason's eyes, namely fear. Jason's like, no deal. No, I'm not doing that. We're done. Like, you made your point, asshole.
Yeah, we're good.
You're not the only person that knows about Warren Harding.
Yeah, but the thing is, all
right, sorry. What are you going to put $20 on?
Oh, I don't know. I forget now.
Warren Harding.
I do always pay my bets. I always pay my bets.
You do, and I paid right on the spot, I have to say.
Right on the spot?
So the thing, I mean, I just have fears. I have fears that, like, are we going to feel good about using this platform to make it to our 1-year anniversary of doing Twitter Spaces? Like, how, is there a point where it actually gets icky?
Okay, so yes, I think that is that is the Biff Tannen scenario. So the Biff. So I think here's the reason that I think you should have solace about this. I think that this is not going to be like, I feel like slightly worse about being on Twitter. I don't think that the dial isn't that fine. I think if Trump is back on the platform, they will likely, because if they eliminate all moderation, let's say, or eliminate the ability to block people or mute them. I mean, if they eliminate all the safety features they've added, if they were to go. I mean, I don't think Elon knows what an unmoderated internet looks like. I don't think he's not close enough to the internet to actually have seen an unmoderated internet. The unmoderated
like
internet
I
is
don't think
boring.
But the funny part, and I don't think. Of course, he's a very smart guy, but I don't think he knows what normal is for any. I mean, because part of it is like this stuff is such a fucking sewer.
It's.
I mean,
he has no clue though. He does not know that like the sewer that is being prevented 24/7, 365.
Well, the best the best like thread I saw on Twitter about this was from the former, Reddit CEO.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit.
Yeah, it was good.
It was a bit of like, if you're in the Mark Andreessen, Elon Musk age of Gen Xers, like your concept of the internet is not what it is.
It's not what it is. Yeah. Did you see this thread, Adam? This is a very good thread about.
Oh
No, I didn't. Is this Ellen Powell?
No. This
no. It was. Oh God, I forget his name before.
Hold on. Let me dig it up.
But he nailed the issues, in my opinion, and because you just sort of now at the same time, do I think that Twitter has done the best possible job from like a product and productization perspective, and really maximizing the value of what they have here? No, like not at all. I mean, it's one of these like cockroach of the fucking internet. You can just stomp on it over and over and over again, and you can do stupid fucking products and kill them. You can buy Vine and stop it. You can do, all this sort of. I mean, like Vine's a good example. Okay,
Vine is a good example. Yeah, Vine is a good example.
They had TikTok years before
they had
TikTok.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, and then like I mean, just your earlier point about like them not being able to kill things, like literally users are inventing the features that are compelling, like retweets, right? Retweets are user invented and
hashtags
only begrudgingly adopted by Twitter. And so I think in the Biff Tannen scenario, this is where Twitter turns into Microsoft Tay. If you remember that, Adam.
Oh God,
I could remember a name, but I couldn't assign it a value. What is Microsoft Tay?
Microsoft Tay is where Microsoft created this friendly bot that would be on Twitter, and you would at Microsoft Tay things, and Microsoft Tay would learn things, and their speech would get better and better and better. But of course, I mean, Microsoft Tay lasted on the open internet for like 18 milliseconds, and
it got super racist immediately, right?
No,
it went crazy racist. Crazy racist.
People purposefully fed it to make it that way.
Yes,
because that's how. I mean, the funny part is, because Elon Musk is a little bit trolly, but like he doesn't even I don't think he even really appreciates the level that some people have brought the art of trolling to.
He is such an amateur from a trolling perspective, and he's got idea the professionals, the preteen professionals, the 14-year-old professionals that are going to troll him under the table. So what they figured out, Adam in particular, is if you tweeted Microsoft Tay, you could then feed it a bunch of additional information that wouldn't be displayed, but would be factored into the model. So that's where you just feed this thing like the most unspeakably racist things that humanity has ever imagined.
I remember right when that was going on. There was a couple of the screenshots where, I mean, it was, I've never seen like a software system basically spit out Hitler and hard R's in like a somewhat, an actual fucking sentence. I mean, it's amazing.
Like, if you're a Microsoft exec reading this, you're like, cut the power to the data center. It's that bad. It is like, we'll deal with all of the wreckage that creates. It was very, very bad. So I think that in this world, I think that where it's like there's no kind of floor. It goes full absolute free speech bonkers, Biff Tannen bonkers, and brands all pull. Like, because then you're going to have McDonald's and Starbucks and United Airlines all going to be like,
saying that they can't advertise, they can't get any revenue.
Right, and then they pull off the platform, and then I think you see I think you will see in that model.
I'm a bit more positive.
I think that is positive. Isn't that positive?
My general impression of Elon Musk is that he's not dumb. He just may not know something right now, but he seems to always run a certain process to learn. And if he sat down and sort of got a bit of an education on the fact that there are nation states attempting to sway elections,
Right.
or people that are actually the targets of crime, or, all of those issues, I don't see him ignoring those, or, like somehow changing those or the like. And in a lot of ways, he doesn't have a history of really doing bad investments either. Right. I mean, the guy makes more money every year from stuff that he does. And so, and I think a lot of it's going to be, he just bought this for, $44 billion. And I think in his mind, Twitter should be worth 200, 300, 400 million dollars. And I think he'll actually work on some ideas that'll potentially make it that.
You think it was his childhood with his folks owning the emerald mines that this worldview?
Yeah.
Well, and his subsequent experience with with the building the Hyperloop that's now in operation, and the battery, the power wall that's in every home, and
I'm joining this Twitter space from the Hyperloop. I was going back and forth from San Francisco to LA in the Hyperloop for this entire time, Josh. I've taken 12 labs.
Presumably using then Starlink to access the internet, right? I mean,
that's
and I assume you're joined through your neural interface.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I I don't.
Good track record is what I'm hearing, to be honest.
No, it's just the guy. I don't see him spending $40 billion to just throw it away. I think he actually spent the money to make more money.
But I think he's going to get bored. I think that it's going to be. I think if it doesn't go full Biff Tannen, which will be, I think, actually kind of mesmerizing, because I think this thing can unspool crazy fast. Which you have seen to other social networks can unspool really quickly.
I'm gonna triple down on what I just keep on saying, and that is that there is nothing that anybody can do to stop Twitter from existing. Not even Elon Musk can fuck up Twitter. Not even Elon Musk.
That's a good one. Okay, so another scenario I've got for you is the PeopleSoft scenario. The PeopleSoft scenario is he comes in and just like absolutely decapitates everyone who's got a level of like director or above, replaces them with cronies, and then walks away.
Yeah, but it's a good example that not a single person that currently works at Twitter is required for Twitter's survival and existence.
That's not true. We've got some people in this space who are employees of Twitter who are absolutely load-bearing.
Twitter is this autonomous...
Present company excluded.
No,
please.
Twitter is this autonomously, like, sentient being that just can exist on its own. Nobody can fuck it up.
Okay, so Twitter Spaces. What do you think is going to happen with Twitter Spaces then?
I have no idea. I didn't even know it existed until you literally DM'd me.
the best kept secret.
I didn't. The funny part was it took me a couple minutes to get on here because I had to download the Twitter app to my phone.
It's
I didn't
terrible.
have the app on my phone either.
It's terrible.
So,
next year in Clubhouse, are we going to see, other social
Clubhouse
audio as like a thing?
Clubhouse is a funny one. It was, God, who was? I think my oldest daughter mentioned Clubhouse to me, and I was like, "You're not going on Clubhouse." And she's like, "What does it mean?" I go, "That's the one that people go and like they chat and masturbate, like that one." She's like, "No, that's it." I'd somehow I'd made like Clubhouse and chat roulette being the same. Yeah, no, exactly. But they just blended together into this one dad moment where I was like, "You're not going on there. People just sit there and masturbate on video." She's like, "That's not it.
Oh, wait,
it's this." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
So there are no cameras.
And meanwhile, she's like, "What the hell are you thinking of? Like, what's your problem, Dad?"
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, no. It's chat roulette. It was a thing. But don't go there. Don't go to chat roulette. I'm really sorry I brought it up.
No, but once I, look, once I sort of had, like direct experience in, these platforms being used to, turn over governments and that kind of thing, as we were heading through 2008, 9, and 10, it just became less interesting to be on these, in my opinion. I think you look at my tweet volume in the last decade, it's basically non-existent.
True. Yeah. I think that I think there's a possibility that Twitter gets marginally better. Maybe this is the scenario that you're talking about, Jason.
Yeah, I think it will.
Matt, what's your take? So you got your hand up.
So I was just thinking, if Twitter does go downhill, and have you guys started thinking about possible alternatives to doing these chats on Twitter Spaces?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, right. We're not going to be on Biff Tannen's platform. So here's my hypothesis. Feel free. We can kind of check in on this one after a couple of months of the post Elon Twitter. I think, again, this is like not going to be close. I think the platform is going to stay like largely the same or get so bad so quickly that nobody can stay on it. And in that model where it gets very bad very quickly, other things are going to appear. I think because the fundamental nugget of the idea is so important and so good, I think that we may be in one of these moments. It kind of reminds me of like when the polarity of the Earth switches, which had just happened many times over geologic history. It's not last time I checked anyway, it's not totally clear why this happens, but it does happen very quickly. It's very it's nonlinear, and once it starts to happen, it flips very quickly. I kind of feel like we have seen movements where like Friendster did die.
Right, Friendster, MySpace, Facebook, right?
Right, live journal just does happen, and so it's.
But there's been so many challenges to Twitter, and we'll do sort of here and there. It's like every fucking year, even without Elon Musk doing it, there's always some Twitter killer that basically existed.
But Jason, I agree with you. But the problem is that Twitter has been like okay, and in a world where Twitter has gone like full Microsoft hey. And people have to leave the platform. That's, I think, a different world.
I don't think it's going to happen.
I think I hope it doesn't happen. I don't know what I want.
No, I think it's. I don't know why anybody in their right mind would sit down right now and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to start a company, and we're going to be like the thing that replaces Twitter."
I think it's a great thing to do right now.
You know. Oh my God! It sounds well. I mean, maybe for somebody, but like for me personally,
right? For somebody else. I mean, are you investing in that company, Brian?
That sounds about as painful as it could get.
So I would. Okay. This is why I'm not a venture capitalist, and don't worry. We're sticking with the computer company for the foreseeable future. But I actually do think that that would be an interesting bet to make if the team is right. And I think that there's some folks inside of Twitter. I mean, watch for high-profile resignations inside of Twitter that could actually go build a reasonable replacement, having learned from it. I do think that those people absolutely exist, and that's.
I just, the thing is like once you start, because I think a lot of the fact that Twitter itself has changed in some ways so little, and it's not one of these things where there's like an explosion of features or capabilities or anything else like that. There's always this sort of core set. It's always confusing to me how such a large product team can have such little output.
I mean, that, Jason. I mean, the number of employees there and the number of visible features you see, the size of that building on Market Street compared with the number of things coming out the door is astounding.
And then the way that I'm saying it, like you would expect more output.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but I think the root of that though is, and I'm trying to give everybody there the benefit of the doubt. I've never actually worked there, but I actually think that it's an exceptionally complex product environment to be working in.
I agree. Yeah.
To where, and what I mean is like, you actually will go and say, well, we have this idea here, but if you would take it through like all the consequences of it and what it would sort of go and be used at, you always like, basically anything you do has got the possibility of being like that Microsoft Tay. It could like really just take it entirely off the rails, and I think it's I think being that type of, you just looked at I thought Twitter was popular, and then when you looked at how fucking Trump used it, and then the fact that Trump's off of it, and well, it's still here, everyone, and everything else, and then
forget Trump. So if they let Trump back on, that means Alex.
No, but it's very hard to do something like Twitter. I don't think it's an easy thing to do.
Totally agree. I agree.
Like,
yeah.
Because if someone sat down and was like, oh, come in here, you get ahead of product. And if I sat down and like was really, sat down and said, okay, well, let's put the product manager hat on. Let's dig through this. I think I'd start going through it and being like, oh, this is too hard.
Well, even if you just had a direct clone, then I mean, you need to seed it with all the content and the users and whatever, and building that seems like a monumental thing to.
So I am hoping not that of course you won't, but with all this freedom talk, I would love to see a restoration of the Twitter API, because that actually would allow people to leave faster. And that would allow, I'm just going to say the quiet part loud. I think, and if whether it's her or someone like her, if someone like Leah Culver were to start who's currently a Twitter employee, if she were to start a Twitter rival, I think that would.
She did start a Twitter rival twice,
and third time's a charm, and the time is right. And like Spaces is a result of that. That's so. I think that there are people inside of Twitter that I would pay. I mean, certainly I would pay a lot of attention to that.
Yeah, I don't know. They just may have, which I think they may have a thing where, it could be that the new owner and the new ownership structure is more receptive to even letting them do the things they want to do.
That's another possibility, actually, is in terms of like, okay, so a positive possibility is
it's not like Tesla and other environments is like that. It's not like those are bad products or bad product companies or have bad product approaches. I mean, relatively speaking. No, I mean, I don't own a fucking Tesla, by the way.
Yeah.
There's
that's a super mixed bag.
I'm going to burn dinosaurs until, I don't have to. Or, I try to walk, I guess.
Well, your dinosaur burner is much less likely to run itself into a pylon. All right, so
but the Tesla, I mean, it's they're not shitty companies. So,
all right. Well, I think we should. I don't know, Adam or Ian. I know you were getting in here out of the other Twitter predictions.
I just shared a tweet into the space about the implications to employees at Twitter today who count on RSUs as part of their package, and the uncertainty that lies ahead for those employees. And in today's job market, the risks associated for Twitter with potentially losing a large number of employees as a result of that uncertainty. I feel like there is a likely scenario in which this is a sufficient distraction that nothing really changes over the foreseeable future. Where I say, the next 6 months or so, Twitter just is mostly the same because there will not be material changes to. They won't be able to muster enough people and political clout within the company to be able to really change direction in the short term. I think it's going to take a little while before anything really shakes out.
All right. Well, I think again I'm saying the change of headquarters is a lock. So I think that's a change you're going to see. I think that's a hallmark of these kinds of hostile acquisitions is that really want to send a message. Is that and it wouldn't also surprise me to see things like changing the logo, other things that constitute burning the flag.
I'll put it on the line and say predict either a direct listing or an IPO within 3 years.
You mean going back to public?
Yeah, I mean, but with a different structure potentially. I mean, or at least that. That's to resolve some of what Ian was saying.
And a higher market cap.
And a higher market cap. Right.
Okay, then I actually do think that the other kind of wild card in here is this is actually a lot of money. A lot of it is debt. It's being collateralized with Tesla stock. There's some non-linearities here that could unfold. If this thing doesn't go well, other things could unspool. But so your prediction is an IPO in 3 years, Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am gonna predict that Twitter is not sold for a decade, and it's sold for less than it's being bought for now. Because I think that I think it's going to be, but I don't know. Maybe I think Elon's going to get bored of this. I think this is not fun. It's going to be hard.
No, but like you guys personally, would you rather work at a Twitter that's run by Jack or a Twitter that's run by Elon?
What's option C?
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess of those
Death
two,
of dignity.
I'd say Jack, but also Jack with a board of directors, as opposed to Elon and the emperor walking in every day with some new good idea.
Yeah, like who have they said? They haven't said anything about who's going to be running Twitter, right?
No.
Okay. But put me down for Antonio Garcia Martinez running the Facebook guy.
Oh yeah, well that makes sense though.
That's a good prediction. Yeah,
that would be pretty consistent, and he would be the kind of velociraptor that I think that Elon wants to feed Twitter middle management to.
I just still can't believe that he worked a 420 joke into his share price. I mean, imagine having that much money where you look at it and it's like, well, it's really worth $49, but you go, hey, can we bump it to 54.20 so we make a 420 joke?
It's scary to me.
I mean, and I guess 69.42 was too high. I mean, like, he's just making marijuana and sexual position jokes in all of his share prices.
Pretty much. I would say it's as if a 14-year-old bought Twitter, but I think the 14-year-olds have got a more sophisticated sense of humor, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
All right, only time will tell. Well, Jason, thank you very much for joining us and taking us on a walk down memory lane with the I feel like we need to be donning our authentic 2005 and 2006 garb, Adam.
Yeah.
For this reenactment of the early web.
Put on one of my brown Scale with Rail t-shirts.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Awesome. We're gonna have a great space next week. Two of our colleagues are going to be who each have separately debugged really interesting issues. Luke Manaden and Jordan Hendricks are going to be here describing their methodology. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that one, Adam. So that'll be
it's going to be great.
Be great. So join us next week. Thanks, everybody.